Hi guys, I'm Darby. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about something that really fascinates me and I find super cool and super interesting, and that is the Dancing Plague of 1518. But before I jump into the Dancing Plague, I'm going to reverse a little bit and give you a quick introduction of who I am and what I'm doing here. So basically I'm just the kid in the back of the class, or rather the front of the class, that will sit and listen wide-eyed and rapt attention as the teacher talks about anything to do with history. I love history. I absolutely adore history, and I always have. But I could not tell you for the life of me, like, anything. I couldn't tell you a president's political stance. I couldn't tell you who ran against who. I couldn't tell you when a war started or when it ended. I couldn't tell you the timeline of a country. I couldn't tell you any of this kind of stuff to do with dates and stances and all that nonsense. But what I love about history and what really sticks in my mind when I listen to it and what I look out for are these stories. And luckily for me, there is so many of them. Stories litter the pages of all history books, and if you look for them, they're pretty darn interesting. For me, the bizarre stories, the weird ones, the unexplained, the unnatural, those are the ones that really kind of take the cake. And that's what I hope to share with you guys on this channel. So today's video, like I said before, has to deal with the Dancing Plague of 1518. So what is the Dancing Plague? Well, it's basically exactly how it sounds. It was a plague, or a disease for lack of a better word, that caused people to dance uncontrollably to where they couldn't stop and resulted in a lot of death for a lot of people. In 1518, thus the Dancing Plague of 1518. So, the bizarre thing about this, and what really intrigued me when I started looking into it more and more, was that, as if people dancing to their death uncontrollably and for, is not bizarre enough. The really bizarre thing is that we still don't have a real explanation for why this happened. Even now, we have no concrete explanation to why this happened, what could have caused it, or, just what happened. We don't know. And that, for me, is super strange and super bizarre with all of our modern technology and understanding of the human brain or diseases in the medical field. There's still no real answers. Now, there's a few theories, which I will get into and cover a couple of some of the more popular ones. But before that, I'm going to give a brief summary of what the plague actually was and what happened, as far as the records show. So, backstory on the Dancing Plague. The whole thing basically started when one woman named Sauer-Drlaca, I might be saying that wrong, so bear with me, walked out of her home on a bright, sunny July day. Okay, well, I don't really know if it was bright and sunny, but I like to imagine it was. Anyway, so she walked out of her home on a I was about to say bright and sunny again, on a July day, into the street, and just started dancing. With no music, no accompaniment, nobody with her. She just started dancing randomly in the street. Now, naturally, people probably thought this was pretty bizarre, and I know what you guys are thinking, but no, she was not possessed by the devil, as we might expect a 1518 woman in the Catholic region of that part of the Holy Roman Empire to be. Now, they may have thought that originally. I don't know. Probably, actually. I'm sure they probably did. But the thing is, it didn't stop with her because the disease, the plague, began to spread. And by the end of the week, about 30 other people were dancing with her in the street. Now, naturally, this seemed like a bit of an issue for the town. People randomly just kind of dancing in the street, no idea why, unable to stop, day and night, no breaks, passing out, collapsing of exhaustion. It was getting to be an issue, and people were taking notice. So the officials at the time, the religious officials and the civic leaders of the area, met with a bunch of doctors and tried to come up with a cure for the dancing plague. For some unknown reason, the cure for the dancing plague was decided to be more dancing. Yeah. So, to enact that cure, they decided that they would just, erect a stage, hire musicians and professional dancers to keep the party going. Yeah. So that's what they did. They erected a stage, they hired professional musicians, and they collected professional dancers to come out, dance with the people, keep them going, keep them on their feet, and just make it a very lively and entertaining party for anyone who wasn't afflicted. So, I'm sure that probably made the streets more bearable to be on, and probably made the city a fairly interesting place for a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I mean 2 full months. This thing went on for 2 months. By the time it was over, about 400 people, that's what the estimate is. The estimate is 400 people had died of exhaustion, heart attack, and stroke. Because let's think about this. They were dancing day and night for 2 months. That's insane. And then it ended just as suddenly as it began, again with no explanation. So I'm gonna talk about some theories that people have of why this could have happened, and when I discuss them, I'm going to talk about what I presume to be the least likely theories to the most likely theory at the end. So the first theory that I want to talk about, and like I mentioned, I feel that this is the least likely theory, is the theory that all these dancing people were from a cult-like group of heretics that were dancing to gain divine favor of some sort. Nobody is given really a clear explanation of what this divine favor might have been, but that was the going theory for a long time there, for a bit. Okay, sure. Well, yeah, there was a lot of weird people doing a lot of weird stuff and believing a lot of weird things back then, right? Well, so maybe that could be possible. Maybe these people were just dancing because they thought some god would shine down upon them for some strange reason. Well, yeah, okay. No, I don't think so, because if we take us a step back and look at it from a human capability perspective, most people now who are super fit, super well-trained, like marathon running type people could maybe dance for about 3 to 6 days tops before they were done. Like done. I could probably dance for, I don't know, 20 minutes before I collapsed. My sorry ass couldn't make it that long at all. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine that. Whew. These people from 1518 were starving and riddled with disease. Like literally, this was on the back of the Black Plague. People were starving. There was famine all over the place. It was not a good time. Not a fun, pleasant time to be in. And these people were not the healthiest, most fit people in the world. So, can we really, if we think about that, can we really imagine that these people would just kind of like go out and start dancing themselves literally to death by choice? Maybe a couple. I mean, people have done weirder things, but 400? That's pushing it in my book. That's a little much. So that's the first theory, and that's kind of where I stand on the first theory. You can let me know what you think, but I'm going to talk about two other theories in this video. The second one being probably the most popular and well-known theory about surrounding this case, and that's about the ergot mold. The ergot mold theory has to do with the idea that maybe these people ingested a toxic mold that grew on their grain, their rye, and it's a plausible theory. It makes a lot of sense when you look at it on the surface. For one thing, the symptoms of the ergot mold are that it produces seizures, hallucinations, and ultimately death, which makes sense. It lines up. Seizures could look like the dancing, potentially hallucinations for the erratic behavior, and death for the, well, death. So yeah, this theory, in all honesty, the pieces fit. They line up. And I actually accepted and went by this theory for a long time before I really started diving into this case and doing the research for the making of this video. But when you start peeling back the layers of it, you look deeper into what actually happened and what the historical records actually say happened at this time. And that is that, first and foremost, these people were actually dancing. It wasn't a seizure. It didn't look like a seizure, and it looks like they were dancing with a purpose. And they actually brought in musicians and professional dancers to dance with them. It looked so much like a real dance. So that's the one part of it. The other part is that the ergot mold is a lot more likely to cause death, which, yeah, they died. But not everybody died, for one thing. Some people came out of it, I hesitate to say okay, but they came out of it. We'll just leave it at that. And those who did die, they died from collapsing in exhaustion, having strokes or heart attacks, which are not outcomes of ergot toxic mold poisoning. So those are those pieces. And yes, if you want to look at this theory and think, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, it's possible, and I totally understand. It does make a lot of sense when you look at it on the surface. But I still believe that this third and final theory that I'm going to talk about makes a lot more sense. The third theory I'm going to talk about is the John Waller theory. It was established and first put out there and suggested by a guy named John Waller. That's the John Waller theory. And basically this revolves around the idea of mass hysteria or a mass psychogenic break. The idea is essentially that the intense stress in the region and the time period from poverty, famine, and disease could have caused psychosis in the townspeople that was able to spread from person to person, causing the mass dancing outbreak. Now, it sounds pretty crazy, when you first just look at it like that, but it's not actually as insane as it sounds, because there has been modern examples of this kind of phenomenon happening. The most famous one, I would say, would have been the laughing epidemic in Tanzania in 1962. And I'm going to take just a slight detour and talk about this a little bit before we jump back into the dancing plague, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. What's important to understand about the laughing epidemic is that the country was under extreme social and political stress at the time. And that's necessary if we're going to compare it back to the dancing plague. What happened is that the whole thing supposedly started with just one girl in an all-girls school, and then who just started laughing hysterically and uncontrollably, and then before long it just spread across the entire country, to the point that numerous schools actually had to temporarily shut down because the whole place was infected with hysterical and uncontrollable laughing. There was nothing that could be done about it. Now, if you look at that then and back to 1518, that's very familiar circumstances. They look very similar. Okay, right, I get it. Laughter makes sense. It's something that we do. We might not like that we do it, but we do it in stressful situations. It kind of comes out when we're anxious. People just kind of start laughing when they have no other way of expressing their emotions. And yeah, it makes sense. And I don't know about you, but I have never gone outside and danced day and night till my feet were bloody because I was worried about an upcoming math test or chemistry test or job interview or whatever, I've just never done that when I was stressed. I have other ways of coping with that, and dancing has never been one of them. So where's the correlation? Well, it does exist. And the last piece that shows us that it exists comes from Waller's theory again. And that has to do with the religious influences of the time. The influences from this guy called Saint Vitus. And Saint Vitus was the patron saint of epilepsy and seizures and dancing, and the idea of this time, and this is really cool because it kind of pulls everything together, like in a little bow that you tie, and yeah. Anyway, so Saint Vitus, the idea was that if you got on this guy's bad side, and he was, for some reason, whatever reason, in disfavor of you, he could strike you with a curse that would force you to dance for eternity. Or, until you died, or until he decided that you had danced enough, or whatever, it's just... So, and if we look at it, that's exactly what we see happen in the dancing plague. So the idea kind of goes like this. The stress caused a psychosis, and the definition of psychosis is essentially that we are able to believe things that aren't there and don't exist, plus the pre-established belief that this could happen. We can pretty easily see how someone might fall into a stress-induced psychosis and believe that they have been cursed to dance. Now, the part that's a little less understood still is how that can transfer from one person to another. But like we've stated, we've seen that happen before. We just don't exactly know why that happens. So that's basically theory 3, and what I find to be the most probable theory wrapped up for you in a little nutshell there. But the final question then is, we look at this and we know it's happened before. We know it's happened a few times before, in fact. So you gotta wonder, when and why will this happen again? Because it's not a matter of if, it's just when. And for what reason? And will we be able to figure out why it happens next time? Alright, that's all I got for today's video. Thanks for watching, you guys. If you want to keep the conversation going about the dancing plague, if you have any questions or comments or just want to say hi, leave a comment in the section below. I will read them and respond to them. If you like this video and want to see more videos about bizarre and unexplained history, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. You guys know the drill. Alright, thanks you guys. I'll see you again soon. Bye now.